I've looked forward to meeting you. And as Neil said, I've been associated with CBS for 25 years, been teaching. Actually, I was here on Friday, I was here on Monday also. And now I'm back on Tuesday. The next 3 days I won't be here, but lots of activities are going on, lots of fun. Before I go into just a bit more details about my background, then let's look at the essential question today. The essential question today is, when you've done well, then what? And that's exactly what we need to answer, because many of us have actually had a nice career. We can tick off the boxes. Family's okay, financials are okay, business or career has been okay, but then there's quite many years left. Many of my clients doing executive coaching are 52, 53, and if everything goes well, then from a health point of view, we still have 40 years or 45 years left, which is a long, long time. So what to do with that? And I'll share with you some inspiration and try to help you yourself answer the question, when you've done well, then what? So take this as an inspirational trip. And as Neil said, we think of both the personal and the business. So it's both a career perspective and a personal perspective. If you have questions or comments during the presentation, that also goes for our virtual participants. Please don't hesitate, because you might as well use the opportunity to come out with your questions. What is most personal is also the most general. So there's no thoughts or ideas or secrets that you can divulge that would actually surprise me or that others haven't thought about. So let's just share some initiatives and some ideas. And please, if I say something which doesn't fit into your understanding of life or career, then please react, because there's no reason to have a person standing telling something which you don't believe in, and then we might have a discussion. The personal business plan, it's a way of looking at life. It's a perspective, and you'll see that it's a motion perspective. And in order to underline that, I just present my own motions through my career. I've had 15 years as a marketeer with global market leaders. Then I had 20 years as an executive search consultant, also with global market leaders. And now I'm entering a third phase where I'm a top executive coach, building my own business with partners in 15 countries now, and users of an online toolkit in 90 countries. So we integrate a virtual form, which we also do today with our listeners and participants on a virtual platform. We synthesize that together with executive coaching sessions and a book I wrote called The Personal Business Plan. But this isn't a promotional input, so I'll just leave that aside and talk a bit about how I arrived here and how I can help you, actually, because it's your fundamental questions, how you can get something out, something practical and implementable about your future. The reason why I had these changes in my life some of them are external. And what actually happened in '96, which is 25 years ago, nearly, two gentlemen from Atlanta flew over in dark suits and told me that, we're sorry to inform you that you're no longer with the company. It's not personal. And I took it rather personal, because I had one wife, I had 4 children. I still have one wife and 4 children, house, car, etc., and felt at a loss because I was sort of a rising star going in one direction and hadn't imagined the idea of simply hitting the wall. But that was quite positive looking at it from a life perspective, because it made me think. And I joined a company, a boutique working with business psychology, which meant that I got to deal with a total different way of thinking and a total different way of acting. So I actually started understanding human beings, not from a marketing perspective, but actually as human beings. So not as users, but as human beings, which has helped me also in my executive search career, always reaching out, understanding people's background and being interested in their background, also learning from there. In my executive search career, I've placed approximately 1,000 CEOs in Danish society and companies, and I've looked into many different levels of companies and also roles in different companies. I just have an echo here, so that's a bit disturbing. In 2014, my wife and I decided to go on our own and found our own company. We founded it in 12, and we built this platform online, which you can use on the personalbusinessplan.com. Some of the questions we answer here are the big questions. So let me build up to the final question, which is what to do when you've done well. One of the most interesting quotes that I know, and one of my favorite quotes, is it's the possibility of having a dream come true that makes life interesting. It's Coelho, and we have two interesting parts here. We have the dream, which we all need to have. We need to have a dream. We need to have something to long for in order to be able to accept the many changes that come around, all the challenges that come around, COVID-19 or others. We need to be able to overcome them by having a dream that we can build on. And then live an interesting life, not only being an interesting conversation partner, but also being interested in others. So we need to have this interaction, and that is actually what we lack for the moment, this continuous interaction with others where we can get inspiration and ideas. In the system that we've built, one of the essential symbols is this four-leaf clover. And the four-leaf clover, if you look at it, it's actually two eternity signs, right? You have a horizontal eternity sign and you have a vertical eternity sign. And imagine that this is life, that you go around, you cross your own path, you change, you come back. So you have a sort of a circular motion through life where you can use different facets of your competencies. And one of the ways of getting to the answer of the question, when you've done well, then what, is to define your life ambition, which means the reason why you're on this planet. That's one way. Another one is to reinvent yourself. I did that twice, and it's fascinating because when you make these dramatic changes, you actually look at life in a totally different way. Your fundamental questions or certitudes are shaken. You need to reorient yourself, and which is a quite healthy process in order to be learning agile, as the third Clover says. Being learning agile meaning knowing what to do when you don't know what to do. So preparing also for the unknown. Preparing, if you are insecure walking into a room, most of us are, if you come to a party, everybody's having fun, you arrive, you're late, you had a little brawl with your spouse about being late or whatever, you arrive at this party and you feel a bit insecure coming in. Instead of having that insecurity, you could have a rule, which means go up to the first person that wears red, right? A decision rule, which makes it easy to come into a room because I would know exactly whom I would talk to in this room if I came in and felt insecure. So there's the possibility of actually planning and having rules of behavior, which simplifies life. And that will help you knowing what to do when you don't know what to do. Actually having this idea of a being in balance to a higher degree. And it's very common to feel insecure. So we have ways of dealing with that. And then the last four-leaf clover here is, or the last leaf is the courage to commit. We've taught our children that do something is our motto at home, which means get an education, get an apartment, get a spouse or a boyfriend or girlfriend, get a job, do something, instead of waiting for something to come out of the blue. So you can actually influence it quite importantly by actually doing something. These elements are some of the elements, some of the keys to understanding yourself and your own behavior, and also programming it, because as Niels said, it's important yourself to have a plan so that you get a feeling of control. I won't stand here and say that I guarantee that you get control of your life, because things happen that we don't control. But what I can give you is a feeling of control, that you have a way of coping with this systematic change that, or systemic change that is happening all over for the moment. So that you learn to see a pattern, you learn to see a way of binding different elements together so it creates a meaning for yourself, and you become less confused simply, which means again that you can act with more executive presence, more boardroom appearance, more security, more convincingly for others. Another way of looking at this is that you need to differentiate yourself, right? I was a headhunter for 20 years, and I noticed immediately the people that differentiated themselves, which means that stood for something unique, something where you don't try to copy others. And I like this quote also: there are no traffic jams along the extra mile. You don't need to compete. You can actually make competition irrelevant if you are strong enough with your message, if you're prepared enough, if you live in the future. And that is sort of one of the challenges, is actually to foresee the future. At the risk of being misunderstood, I see myself as standing 10 years ahead and looking at the careers and the lives of people. I have a very precise idea of how they will develop. And this certitude of having these patterns of behavior will actually make you also more resistant, more robust in general. And that robustness, again, will give certitude, will give control, will give clarity. So it's a sort of a positive mechanism working. One of the ways of doing this, and this is one of the exercises, what we do now is simply we touch upon, it's a small teaser, small appetizer, we touch upon some of the concepts that we work with, but we also go in detail with some of the exercises. And I think there's about 10 exercises that we'll actually deal with. This is one of them, defining your guiding principle. And just before I mentioned that we have all this information coming at us, this incoherence, this turbulent surrounding with social media, with news, whatever comes at us, and which doesn't necessarily give any meaning. It could be quite disturbing, actually, to have all this information coming at us. So what we need to do is to align these different messages from an individual point of view, from a group point of view, from an organizational point of view, from a societal point of view, and from a world perspective. So what I've been doing with lots of clients is working on each person's guiding principle. One person ended up with radicalization. He would combat radicalization in the world. Another chose to help healthcare system in Burma. That was called at that time. So you can choose different angles of getting your own meaning into your own activity. What is important is that it's an overarching principle. It's a concept that overarches your daily life, so it brings you in a specific direction. Anybody knowing the person up there with a lever? It's Archimedes, so it's an old gentleman. And one of Archimedes' sayings is, give me a place to stand and a lever long enough, and I'll move the world. Give me a place to stand and a lever long enough, and I'll move the world. Which fits perfectly into this guiding principle, because if your belief in this principle is strong enough, you have a solid foundation. If you are able to communicate it clearly to others, then you'll be able to convince them, and you'll have an enormous impact. So you'll be able to move the world. So this is a way of visualizing an impact that you can have. And what you will experience is that there's an alignment in your messages. So instead of having at each and every of these levels a total discordance, total counter reaction, you actually get an alignment where you get everything in line compared to your message, which again means that you don't necessarily convince others, but you convince yourself. And that is an absolute prerogative for convincing others. If you're in doubt or if you're confused, then you won't be able to convince anybody else. And you'll see when we come a bit further in the presentation that this goes for your life also, that you might have a guiding principle for your own career, for your own life, and for the combination of the two. In the personal business plan, we work with democratization. We want to democratize executive coaching. We've been doing a lot at the top of the food chain, at the CEO level and the board level. We want to bring that out to the world, and we do that through the online toolkit, which is available for everybody. So there's a sort of a movement in us and in our partners and my wife working together. And this sort of movement actually justifies much of our activity because we have a greater purpose, a greater meaning behind. And I remember when we found that it was a sort of a relaxed feeling that this is it, this is what we do. And if we look at myself, then I would say personally, I bring existential clarity. Existential clarity is what I work with and what I help my clients obtaining. And of course, that's a big word, it's a big concept, but it actually works to get a sort of a feeling. And you would probably be able to find yourself in this rather huge slide where you have many words. To the left, you have these different age groups, right? 39, 49, 59, 69. And many of my clients are actually coming into a new decade. I remember a woman coming up after one of my keynotes, and she said that she had been employed in the same company for 28 years. She'd been a partner. It was a professional services company. She'd been a partner for 18 years, and it simply didn't seem as much fun anymore. It was like, you know, it was going through the motions. I see people nodding. People have been there, so it's you know the feeling. And she didn't know why. And she asked me, or then I asked her, "How old are you?" And she said 49. And I said, "That's why." So you simply look at the second part of your life and you ask yourself some existential questions. I had the visit of a person at 48 this morning, talking about the future, how to deal with it, what to do, a person with everything in the right place, let's say career, marriage, financial situation, etc. But there was something lacking for the rest, and you can't simply do more of the same. You know, the MOTS, more of the same, doesn't work. You need, in all these years, also ahead, to rise to the occasion and actually change. One of my clients also said, working at a huge Danish pharmaceutical company, you can imagine which one, said that there must be a life after this company and before death. So we can't simply be corporates all life and then go into oblivion. We need to have a plan for making this transition. And I'll just exemplify some of the questions here. If you look at the 4 columns on the slide here, you have personal, you have business, you have financial, and you have physical. Some of the personal questions you might have or remember when you're 39 is, how can I secure my family? A business question could be, how can I keep up with the 25-year-olds, digitalization, etc. How can I get the most out of my situation? Could be a financial question. If you remember back, it's all about me, right? It's about securing, it's about gathering, it's about securing the future. Then at 49, a typical question would be, how can I best live the second half of my life? That is a question I get. And, you know, it's existential. When we become 50, then there is some changes, thoughts about the next part. And you also start to feel that, let's say, the physical part starts being less. At 39, you might see a gray hair. What is the first time you see a gray hair? You think, what's that? At 49, you might ask yourself, how can I compensate for my loss of organic functionality? Loss of organic functionality simply means that you become less strong relatively, which means that you lose from 30 to 60, you lose 1% of your muscle mass or organic functionality. From 60 and onwards, you use 1.5% per year, which means that when you're 90, you have about 25% left. So we need to prepare ourselves for that. We need to do something about it, right? But if you don't do it, the planification and front load it, then you will be taken by the events and you'll have some difficulty in hanging in there. I've seen great people continuing their career, Maersk McKinney Møller was one of the good examples, being laser sharp at a relatively high age. There's many examples of people actually performing very well, but they've been at it, they've been working, they've been keeping themselves in form and being interested and interesting to others. Then at 59, becomes more existential. How can I create a meaning for myself? How can I best use my experience to create value for others also, not only for myself, but how can I give? How can I contribute to others? And then the question that we're dealing with today, when I've done well, then what? So what can we bring in that will actually disturb the rhythm that I have now and bring in something new, some energy, some wildness, some vitality, some challenge, doing something which is totally unexpected, which is great fun, gives lots of energy. And I have a long list and examples of what you could do. I have 2 clients sailing around the world for the moment, for example. And then the questions about the physical questions, you know, what did you say? The hearing starts being a bit worse, and wear my glasses and start thinking about, well, forgetting things. 69 years old, what legacy can I leave? One thinks about the rest of the life, what could we leave which is permanent, which is will not disappear with you? And how can I stay relevant? How can I keep myself informed? I have a mother-in-law who's 87 now. She orders everything online on the phone. She is on mobile banking. She buys tickets or transfers money, wires money to the grandchildren while waiting in the queue at the airport, etc. It's just incredible. And that is a question of mentality. Of course, she's chosen to do that. You never hear a word of complaint. And of course, there would be ways of complaining or things to complain about, but it's a choice. One question that is also very often, how can I give back? And I've worked a lot with clients going into philanthropy, finding something which not only giving money, but something which actually is in line with this guiding principle, which gives a sense of worthiness and worth to yourself and keeps you occupied also, because you need to have this mix between obligation, duty, and free time and fun. So these are some examples of questions that we would go into. And instead of dealing specifically with the answers to those, I would like simply to present the system that we've built. And it's a very practically oriented system. It consists of a book. It consists of 10 executive coaching sessions of 2 hours. And then it consists of a virtual tool that you can use that will create an ebook about yourself. And I believe, as an academic, I believe very much in the written word. So you can actually go in and write yourself an ebook about your career and life, which means that it also obliges you. It gives a certain obligation. When you've written that you're going to do things, then the probability that it's going to happen is much higher. The questions here is only 10 chapters. We have lots of exercises beneath that. And I would like to give you a taste, the flavor of these exercises. This is not great art, but Pinocchio here, you'll see online, it's more convincing. Imagine that you have the past over here, right? You have the past here, you have the present here, and you have the future over here. What all this is about is editing the past, which means that we take all the characteristics, all our inner dialogue, all the elements that we think about, denigrating ourselves, all our negative thoughts, we pool them together and we send them away. So we edit the past. Examples could be, I've had CEOs telling me that they were introvert or clumsy. And if a person who is 50 years old tells you I'm clumsy, then I can ask, when did you turn something over last? When was the last time you, turned something over? And well, they can't remember, but somebody in their past said they were clumsy, and they have been repeating that. So they have defined themselves as clumsy, which is not necessarily true. The introvert part is the same. If they've been acting professionally extrovert for 30 years, 40 years, then they have become professional extroverts. They are not introverts anymore, but they still define themselves as introverts. So you can have lots of different articles or characteristics that are in your inner dialogue that you know will influence you. I had a client once who said she was ugly. And she wasn't ugly, but her mother has always said that you are as ugly as me, or just referring to a characteristic. So it's deeply ingrained, and it's a strange way of educating people. But the result is the same, that you keep repeating something for yourself, and which is negative, of course. So what we do here is that we take these strings. You have the red strings, and we take some scissors and we cut them, which means that we curate the present. And curation, just like museums, right? We take the exhibitions or the oeuvre or the artistic chef-d'oeuvre, we take them and we put them in front for the public to see. It's the same we do when we are on social media. We don't put up photos of Facebook or when we do the dishes or whatever. No, it's more exciting. So we present a certain face of ourselves. And that is exactly what I'd like to do with my clients, presenting positives that they take for granted. I've had clients who speak Mandarin without mentioning it, without thinking that that's something special. But of course, it's crucial. So things that are so integrated in you that you take it for granted and you take it for given, it might be a fantastic element to put forward and curate in the present for others to see, but you think it's easy. I had a client once, a partner from Goldman Sachs in New York, and she said, I asked her if if I worked with her for 6 months, what would the most surprising thing be after 6 months? And she said, how good I am at math, which means that she took it for granted, but of course then putting it forward and saying what distinguishes you compared to others is important. And you will all be able to find elements that you can get rid of. It's so classic that we have this inner dialogue, which is sort of negative or a bit critical, whereas we might be very positive and sustainable and helping, generous towards others. But when it's our own inner dialogue, then it becomes a bit Calvinistic and Lutheran and very much harder on ourselves. So that we edit the past, right? We curate the present. And then the most interesting part is that we design the future. And that is where it becomes very interesting, because you can actually define actions that you wouldn't have thought of. One example is a client that I had in 2018 who owns a company. And we talked about him going on a sabbatical for 6 months together with his wife and children in 2023. So after 5 years, now 23 is approaching. So he needs to get a CEO on board in order to be able to leave for 6 months. And then he'll sell his company in 2033, which means that this is since 2018, it was in his calendar to sell his company by 2033, which gives a totally different perspective. Now it's simply executing. Are we good at doing what is in our calendar? Really good, because we've been training for it a lot, right? So if we put some elements which are also existential, some are personal, and from a life perspective can change your life, then you will actually execute it. So this is very technical, it's very practical. And the only thing I've been doing in my work is to turn some of the things that we use for projects or processes that we're very good at, products, use those same ideas, strategic ideas for ourselves. And one of my mentors said that it's extraordinary that we're so competent when dealing with processes, products, programs, etc., and we're so incompetent when we're dealing with ourselves. Then all of a sudden it becomes very blobbly or very wobbly, very difficult to answer questions. If it was only a business decision, you would have it out in arm's length, it would be very easy. But for some reason, we don't prepare our own life, and then we sort of miss some opportunities. Again, I say we can't control it. Things will happen that we didn't prepare. I can get run over by a bus leaving this auditorium. But again, it's better to have a perspective, a direction, than not to have any plan at all. So what happens then when we cut these strings? Well, the arms go up, right? And then you have this perfect picture from the future where you have a new dialogue about yourself, you have a new vision about yourself, and you can actually be more convinced, more secure in your communication to others. One way of documenting your life is going through this exercise where we also online go through your life and look at the highs and lows. Imagine that this is a scale from well-being from +100 to -100. You have some elements that are under the line here in 70 and in 2005, for example, might be a death of a parent or illness of a child. And now I become a bit cynical, bear with me. We know that our parents are going to die, right? We know that there's a certain statistical probability that this will happen at a certain age, but it's very difficult to decide how to deal with it. We also know that we'll age, we'll have different, children will leave home. There are so many life stages, life events that are the same for everybody. We're all alike, we live the same life, which means that we can prepare for it. We know when things are going to happen. And this will also give a certain calm in your life to know that you're not different. I had a discussion with a psychologist. I know one of my friends whom I work with, and his mother died, and he was, of course, in a sorrow. But he also said to himself, could this be different? You know, and that was a comfort for him, because no, it couldn't. You know, it was, of course, going to happen. So we have a possibility of preempting some of the things that we deep down fear, and simply putting our words onto it, making it clear, makes it a lot easier. And you know very well the conversation you have with friends. In the beginning, it was about activities and children. Then it was about relationships and couples. Then it becomes about your illnesses and parents' illnesses. And this is progression in life. So we know what is going to come. And since we live the same lives, why not use some of the, let's say, documented life stages and life activities that we have, because it's no secret, there's no magic bullet. It's simply a question of registering what is happening for other people. And since we're only a sample of one, then probably it will also happen to us. It's a bit cynical looking at life that way. I know it could be, some people could object that it's too planned, too structured. But the interesting part is that when you have a structure, then you can deviate from it, right? When you have a strategy, you can deviate from it. You can do different things and you know what you're doing. So it actually gives you some freedom also. Very often when people go through this, if it's a CEO client, then the person will be taken by the professional part, and then they got promoted, and then they and sometimes I had to ask, well, didn't you get married? Also, oh, sorry, yes, I did get married. I did have children, etc. So they come in with other parts. So it gives you a total picture of your life. And gentlemen and ladies, this is your life. These life phases are based on Rudolf Steiner, who you might know, pedagogical guru. And you might just use a couple of seconds to find yourself in this, at what stage you are. I've highlighted from 40 to 45, but I could also have highlighted 50 to 60. The important thing here is that there is a symmetry around the 50, around the watershed, around the big 50, the big 5 in your life. And let's look at the phase 9, which is 50 to 60 years old, a strong need to reinvent yourself and reestablish an identity. That actually mirrors phase 3. If you remember back when you left home, you had these ideas of changing the world. You had the strong need to build an identity and change the world. It's the same feeling of needing to reinvent yourself, do something, stand for something, not be taken for granted. You're still worth something. You can do something. And lots of my friends are in that phase and have unconsciously gone through many changes. But again, there's no reason to do things unconsciously if you can do them consciously. And then afterwards, again, you become critical and rebellious. That is the same phase as phase 2, critical and rebellious. And then comes an interesting part when you become a grandparent. Then it's interesting to see grandparents and grandchildren together, because they're both learning. They both take time to learn again, looking at a flower, looking at a caterpillar, using the time necessary in order to understand. That's because they have the curiosity and learning again, which for 40 years was buried in work, where we didn't have the time. We needed to do something and have some activities. So you actually re-find yourself. And my mentor there, I mentioned before, at one point I saw him sitting with a grandchild on his knee, and he waves and the kid waves back, and he tells his wife, look what I've taught her. And the wife says, she taught you. So, so both are sitting there waving and thinking that each other learned the respective learning. Simply looking at that, I don't say that this is the truth and nothing but the truth, that there's no other ways of describing life phases, but simply knowing and preparing the next life phase is interesting. And if you start working profoundly with yourself, you'll find lots of good answers. So it's a way of kickstarting a process where you first have the questions and then you have the answers. And that is sometimes what is critical about executive coaching or coaching, is that there's lots of questions but no answers. But we also give answers because we've looked at so many lives pass by that we have a certain grasp of the totality or the holistic approach. This is another exercise which is lots of fun. Do anybody remember integration from school? Integration? Math integration? Yes. Yeah, you do. Good. So you see here that I've illustrated the area beneath the curve with the learning that you've had in a certain period. So imagine that you have a period from today is 2020, then you go back to 2000, and you have the, this area here is the area where a symbol of the learning that you've had over the last 20 years. And just take 30 seconds, close your eyes, also at home, close your eyes for 30 seconds and think through all the learning you've had during the last 20 years. Right, 30 seconds is quick when you're in good company. Well, we won't go into detail about your thoughts, but it's an enormous amount of learning you've had, right? 20 years is a long time. And my challenge to you now is to increase that amount over the next 20 years, which means that the area under the curve from 2020 to 2040 should be bigger than the area that the learning that you've had during the last 20 years. And it goes without saying that you simply can't do more of the same, right? You can't exercise more or work more, or you can't press or squeeze more energy out of the same activities. So you need to determine some new things to do. And again, I have a list of hundreds of different activities one could think of. One way of keeping your brain lit and alive is learning a language. Learning a new language every 10 years is great for the brain. We work with neurologists who also, let's say, can document the learning that is taking place and the activity, the brain activity of different initiatives that you can have. So learning a language could be one. Learning an instrument. I don't play an instrument. I see you screaming. Learning an instrument, playing the guitar, drums, we would be very bad at it in the beginning, extremely bad, extremely incompetent, and that's a feeling we usually don't accept, because we accept ourselves as competent. So I remember I started boxing 6 or 7 years ago, and in the beginning you do this rope thing, and in the beginning it's just awful because it's just so bad and so ridiculous. But then all of a sudden, well, it comes and it starts. So starting to be incompetent in an area is also a way of learning some humility, which is good for you in many ways. From a work point of view, you could also choose to work in another country. If you have not, let's say, been in an African country, you could go and work in an African country. You can also take up a project that is different. I have a number of clients for the moment who follow an AI course as MIT. You can do that online, which means that you start interesting yourself for something which is different, that you don't know necessarily something about, but learning about AI, is that relevant? Yeah, right, okay. It's everybody knows it's relevant. I participated in a seminar or a conference where one of my colleagues were a member of a panel, and it was a professor from it was an academic setting and in an American university. And she raised her hand when somebody asked whether she participated in a panel, and that was okay. It was only when she sat with the panels that she realized she was the only human being. All the others were robots. And then she said, sitting there a bit awkward, she said, well, this is sort of an out-of-body experience. And the robots go, It's a bit creepy. Afterwards, she had a dinner with Max, a robot, who actually conversed her during the whole evening. She felt wonderful. He asked all the right questions. She was very interested, broadened out the conversation, and that is due to AI, right? So they can do better than us, also in social intelligence, actually. So we are approaching a era where we need to be competent also in that direction. So getting mind blown, getting some ideas, some input, which is totally new. Or you could also start studying again. Many of you, of course, since you've been in this illustrious institution before, know the knowledge of learning or simply following a new education. And it's never too late. I know lots of people who started studying again at a certain age, and it simply engages you, it motivates you, and the perspective is so much different because you've had that experience yourself during life. So it's not going only back to the school bench, it's actually combining lots of your knowledge. And it's this integration or synthesis of knowledge that is interesting, to perhaps learn some of the things again, but learn it from another perspective, putting yourself in front, looking back at evolution, looking at what has been. So we have lots of ideas, both in the book and online, on what to do, what types of projects to work on in order to have this vitality, and also, to be honest, to be more interesting to others. This is also because some of us will leave the corporate functions that we're in, which means that over to the left here, you have the function, that is a role. And then you have your behavior, and then you have you as a person. If there isn't a certain alignment between these three levels, then you'll have an issue at one point in time. You'll have a sort of irregularity. People can't grasp you anymore. They don't understand. If you have parallel lives, one personal life and one business life, then when the business role disappears, then you're sort of lacking one leg. It's very difficult to stand on one leg only always. It's very tiring also. So you need to have a behavior or an alignment between your role and your behavior and you as a person. And that is also some internal work that will come out of the personal business plan, that you document what you stand for. You get to the depth of your own capabilities and your competencies, how you want to differentiate yourself and stand. This person you've probably seen before, Dwight D. Eisenhower. He built this box that you probably see. It's also called Quadrant 2. But what is important is that he said that what is important is seldom urgent, and what is urgent is seldom important. We all have an urge to do what is urgent. That's what we do we're schooled to that. If your boss or board or whatever says something is urgent, then you work with that. So up in the left corner, You have important and urgent, and of course, in order to do our jobs, then we need to perform there. There's no doubt. So we need to decide, or we need to work at that. Then we can delegate some of the things that are not important but urgent, which means other people can take care of that, and some of the people will actually feel rewarded if they get to do some of the things that they aspire to or that they haven't done before. So it's a learning curve for them. And then down in the right bottom corner, you will have something that you can eliminate. You can have different waste of time activities that you can eliminate. Most of the people I work with, including myself, use too much time on news and social media, simply going through. It's always interesting. In the American election, we've been very, very much informed, and it's been fascinating, but okay, we've got it, right? So we've seen it from 3 different or 4 different media points of view. It's a sort of over-information, and it will actually frustrate you also because you get so many different signals in many different ways that you'll be a bit more confused. The important quadrant here is the not urgent important, and that is up to the right, the orange quadrant, where we place our own development. So we place our own strategy, our own life. You remember John Lennon, who said life is what happens while you're busy doing other things. All the other things are in the other quadrants. Life is up there, where you can actually prepare yourself and have a strategy for your own evolution, not being dependent on others, not being dependent on a headhunter calling. You actually know what you're going to do. You have a plan or a strategy for your own life, which also means that if you start your day by answering emails, then you're already on somebody else's agenda, right? So you need to use the productive hours in the beginning of the morning for your own agenda. I know quite many people who've been quite successful having a full-time job, more than full-time job, but working for themselves in the morning, doing their projects, doing their investments, doing their stuff in the morning, and getting that done so that they secure that they're doing it. So there's lots of grit in there. There's lots of discipline also. I don't say it's easy. It's a lot of work also going through the personal business plan, but it's a lot of fun also. So it's both hard work and fun. Until now, I mostly talked about you as a person, right, as an individual. But of course, we all belong to networks, and we belong to more and more to networks. We're totally networked. This is a model that we use in 2 different ways. We do it in order to map. We do this exercise called Happiness 360 in order to map our existing network. And it might be difficult to read, but some of the bullets here, it's a Ferris wheel, right, going round. And imagine that at some point in time in life, the children are the most important. Then it would be the weight would be on the children, which means that the Ferris wheel would turn so that this ball with the children is the lowest. You have friends when you have the small kids, you don't see as many friends in that period. Then you have your boss, community, parents. The community is important. It's in Denmark, it would be the associations, all the clubs and networks that we're part of, sports, etc. All the benevolent activities. In the US, it would be church, amongst others, and the neighbors also. So we are born into a sort of community. If we look at this network, we will be able to define who can help us. Being a middle-aged male, I've not always been very good at asking for help. But this could actually be a good advice, asking for help. And there's lots of people out there that want to help you. My rule of thumb, well, I presume that you know the golden rule of networking is giving without receiving without expecting anything in return, right? So giving, 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 giving. I've been giving all my life. I like that. I like helping people. But then at some point in time, we need to capitalize on that social capital. We need to ask for help also. And I usually tell my clients that actually you do them a favor. You know, Niels, if I ask you for help, what would you say? You would probably say yes, yes. And if you help me, then you'll probably feel happy afterwards. You'll feel satisfied. That was great. He asked me for my help. I did it. I'm great. I'm good. So it's automatic that you actually give people something when you ask for your help. So you make their day, right? I'm perfectly aware that it's simply a way of programming yourself, but it's important when you take the phone or you give a call, send an email, that asking for help is actually elevating the other part, so there's no reason for not contacting people and asking for help. So that is one way of using this model, is mapping your existing network. And I can assure you that you have lots of potential help out there that you haven't used until now, and we can work on making available. The second part, which is as important, is defining the network of the future. In 10 years, which network do you want to be part of? And there are ways of, if you're a CEO, to go to the board networks to raise to that level, or if you're a functional director, to raise to the CEO level. And I'm not only speaking career here, it could be different ways of approaching different people from a cultural background or whatever. But it's simply this, having this image, this identification of the network that you want to create afterwards. And I've been able to connect people to an extreme high degree with people that they wouldn't think they would be accessible normally. But if you do your homework and if you program it and have a time perspective which is long enough, then you can actually, it's sort of automatic. It becomes automatic, presuming or under the condition that you're an interesting conversation partner. So you need to have your themes right. You need to be able to have your informed opinion about many things and be able to direct the conversation in a specific way. Being on top of certain topics, I don't want to say that you need to be an expert in politics or AI or technology or digitization, etc., but you need to have your point of views about it and also your points of reference. So there's a whole preparation. It might again seem cynical, but in different periods of my life, I've had small cards in my inner jacket with different themes that we could discuss at a dinner table. When you've discussed the sports, the football, soccer, or the weather, or the television programs, or some politics, then what? And then if you throw some, if you have your own topics that you throw on the table, then you'll be able actually to become quite an expert, because you get input from many different people. And you simply have to listen. You have to ask some questions and listen. I know that it could seem a bit too programmed or too cynical, but it works. And again, the proof lies in the eating of the pudding. So I can see how people have developed. Also, one very important thing is that many of my clients actually don't like networking because they say that they remember the cocktail parties or the receptions or the waste of time, or going there and having to talk to people, then finding out how you get away for them and starting another conversation. So the mechanics are simply exhausting for them. But what I've succeeded in doing is transforming that networking idea, their concept or understanding of networking, converting that into one-on-one interesting conversations. So if your image of networking becomes an interesting conversation with somebody who you'd actually like to talk to and spend time with, then it's a totally different concept. It's the same, but it's a different entry, and you also get to contribute to other people's lives in a much deeper way. So much of what I've been talking about here is about courage, right? The future belongs, as always, to the brave, and it takes some courage to define or design the future, because you have to leave the present. You have to see yourself in a future role, but again, there's no risk to it. There's only an upside, deciding on where you can go and how you can do it, because you'll feel an enormous joy by achieving your targets, achieving your goals. It'll be an enormous gratification. That is what I see with my clients. So in order to wrap up, I'd like simply to give you a few words of advice, some different pieces of advice in order to gain success and happiness. They're in the book and they are online also. And it sort of brings back some of the things I've been talking about today. Be generous without condition, always be generous. Be inclusive and tolerant. Try to work with other people who are very much different from a cultural perspective, from a racial perspective, from a sexual perspective, from different perspectives. Try to encompass different views and try to do your best at provoking yourself. That is one of the reasons why I love boxing, because we have people of all origins in that club. It's very much different from my daily life. And that is one of the most rewarding experiences, because you get confronted to lots of different people. Be an interesting conversation partner goes quite well with what we just discussed. So you have to bring your own theme, you have to bring your own agenda, you have to bring your own information, your own knowledge to the table. And then probably the most important, and some of you will have heard, Bruyant-Langer. Have anybody heard about Bruyant-Langer, a Australian nurse who worked at a hospice? She has written a book called The 5 Regrets of the Dying. And I talk about life and death, but I haven't experienced it nearby in the same way as she. But she sat and held people in their hands while they were dying, and asked them what they regretted in life. And the most important message was, I regret that I lived up to other people's expectations and not my own. So this is a way of sort of wasting life, trying to satisfy other people who will not be there anyway in the future and who don't care about you. Frankly, they don't give much for that. So we're not as important in life as we think we are. If you want to reach want to see your importance in life, then take a glass of water, put down your finger, and see the effect when you leave. There's actually, we leave very little footprint. So the idea that other people are very interested in us and in our lives is actually inadequate. So what we try to do in order to please other people, might be our parents or our teachers or colleagues or spouse, etc., doesn't count in the big game. However, if you're able to define your own agenda, that will include and lift other people also. So you'll be able to help and stimulate to a much higher degree. Then when you have that message, it's possible for you to be direct and clear in your communication. You've probably heard the one about spending 10,000 hours in order to excel. I usually say that it's don't do it, don't make it, don't do it until you make it, do it until you become it. Right, so it has to be totally integrated. It takes a lot of time to integrate a new message about yourself. Break the mold before you break down. So if there's a stress or a situation which is intolerable, then break the mold, do something different, do something else instead of accepting it. I have lots of clients who've worked in corporate life for many years, and some of them are galvanized, which means that they have one more year to go in the circle of the company, and they simply are too tired and they need to somehow stop. And it's very important to say that it's not about whining. It's not about, you know, having saying that they're not privileged. Most of the people I work with are well off. Everything is working fine, but they still have this insatisfaction, this sort of feeling that things are not right. They could do something different, and that is, of course, we need to take that seriously. Also, that we need to put something novel in there, inject some energy. Run a risk from time to time. If you feel too secure, then it's boring. So run a risk, do something different. Move to another country. Find your life ambition. That is a hard work, but it's important to find out why you're on this planet. And then, as you can hear, the underlying tone in all my presentation has been reinvent yourself. It's never too late. And the one big English study about successful lives and happiness has followed, I think it was 800 men longitudinally, which means it's the same person being interviewed all through life. What they found out was that the persons who had the highest degree of happiness at an older age were people who had changed their comrades or their their partners, the people they worked with, they had changed that to other spheres of life. Because if not, if you have your colleagues and your work, and then you stop, then there's a dismal fall. Whereas if you can prepare for yourself, have other different platforms, you can work on other people, then you can start working and having like a parachute instead of this this fall. So you need to have a diverse interests. That'll be all for me, just in this context, and I would very much like to take questions from you. You can look at the website, thepersonalbusinessplan.com, and you can subscribe to the toolkit if you want to have some exercises going through it. It's a free trial. But for now, I simply want to wish you and your loved ones all the best in life. Thank you very much.